indicate, colleagues, we are talking the Preferential Procurement Regulation, and yeah, it's interesting times. So it's one of those things where you are literally hitting the ground running. So the purpose today, what you're going to be discussing, we're going to discuss the purpose of these sessions, and also what are the specific goals as the Preferential Procurement Regulation that was issued, I think, sometime early this month, if not last month. And we know that I called it a smackdown. There's a smackdown going on between National Treasury and DTI. What is National Treasury's perspective about these regulations? And there was a forum that National Treasury hosted. I don't know, some of the colleagues were able to attend. We were also able to get hold of the presentation. And there was also a media statement that the DTI was issued, which we're going to be talking to that as well. And also, basically, is there a difference in how do we move forward? So this session is basically meant to become an interactive session, like all of our sessions are, where we can actually share options, ideas, solutions, and we do believe that we may have a solution, and therefore we are here to discuss those. So firstly, the purpose of this session, this platform is for public procurement and supply chain professionals that are interested in moving forward with the profession. Our purpose is to help public procurement and SCM professionals to do exceptional work and progress in their fields. And what basically happens is that we always try to bring whatever that is latest and relevant in the space. We discuss that. Can those who have National Treasury presentations share with some of us who doesn't have, please, colleagues, there is that request. I will see, I actually do have it. I'll see if I can be able to also share it in the chat. If not, can somebody please share the National Treasury's presentation? It's going to be very helpful to our colleagues as well, because not everybody actually was invited. And today we intend to present different views. This is by no means meant to create any controversy, but I think when discussions become robust, this is also where our mind gets to be opened in thinking of other different options that exist. And the intention is merely to understand the position and to find solution in to moving forward. So we did invite DTI and B-BBEE Commission for today's session, but they responded to say that today, actually, they are going to be having their own joint workshop to develop guidelines for organ of state on this matter. And they'll see if maybe they can join us in the future. Well, we did not invite National Treasury or the Office of the Chief Procurement Officer, because there was those roadshows with that presentation that National Treasury issued in terms of their position about these regulations. Now, as I did indicate, we are talking specific goals. Triple PFA Act, a bit of background, talks about specific goals may include contracting with persons or categories of persons historically disadvantaged by unfair discrimination on the basis of race, gender, or disability, and also implementing the program of the Reconstruction Development Program published on the Government Gazette. I don't know, colleagues, by show of hands, is there anyone who actually has gone through that RTP Gazette? Is there anyone who has gone through that RTP? I see a hand. I don't see your name. Can you please speak? Apologies, I'm not seeing who raised the hand. What are you finding in that gazette? Somebody raised the hand. Mlungisi, is it you?
Yes,
Welcome.
It is me. Good morning, colleagues, and thank you so much, Chairperson. I did look at the gazette. It's such a very lengthy document, but there is a specific chapter that deals with the issue of the economic policy framework, because I was just trying to find out the specific goals. And that chapter is chapter 3 on the Gazette, and it talks about economic policy goals and the objectives. So they are clearly stipulated there. And then if you cross-reference what is indicated on those specific goals against the Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment Act, and the Triple PFA Act, then there is synergy. It might be the way the goals are written on the RDP document, but there is synergy of what we need to do. I wouldn't be able to read to the colleagues, but if you get hold of it, go on chapter 3, the economic policy framework, and then it is clearly stipulated there. Thank you,
Okay.
Chair.
Thank you so much. Ms. Chava, are you sorted? I saw your hand was up and you went down again.
Yes, I am. Thank you, Thandy. I am sorted. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So yes, and then now I think the whole thing of National Treasury now talking about having learned from their lessons, they literally mirrored the regulation in terms of what the Act is saying. So on the regulation, it says that specific goals mean specific goals as contemplated in Section 2(1)(d) of the Act, which may include contracting persons or categories of persons historically disadvantaged by unfair discrimination on the basis of race, gender, disability, including implementing the RDP goals. Brian? Welcome. Brian raised the hand.
Sorry,
Okay.
can you hear me?
Yes, yes, I
Right.
can hear you.
Sandy, I have a point of confusion, and National Treasury avoids the issue. If you look at the PPPA, it states clearly in Section 1, only those that meet an acceptable tender is permitted to enter the PPPA. All right.
Mm.
So if I got an acceptable tender, which means it complies with the contract conditions, the specifications, and any qualifications I've set for performance of my contract.
Mm.
Afterwards, Section 2 says I need to apply a price competition. Then I must allocate preference points, right? And then I do objective goals. Now, this happens after I have already determined an acceptable tender. The process for that is in the PFMA, not in the PPPA. So the Transformation Act is actually the B-BBEE Act, which determines the transformation requirements of our organizations. What I don't understand from Treasury is you cannot put any form of pre-qualifications or any form of the latest goals they're applying prior to you having a list of acceptable tenders. It only limits the allocation of preference points to those bidders that have entered into the price competition. That's question they keep avoiding. The second question, which we're taking up with the BBBEE, is, and it comes back to what the previous speaker said about the reconstruction and development program, very much so. The biggest problem I have with this section is objective evidence and independent verification. The Section 10 of the BBBEE says we can use the relevant code of conduct, code of practice, which is 400 for procurement. All right. So in code 400, I have an indicator verified by people on women ownership. All right, which forms within the restructuring and development program. So my preference policy can state that I will only give points to people who achieve the scores based on that indicator. All right, and this is all per the primary acts, not per regulations. Yet Treasury comes back with statements saying that specific goals is contracting with persons, categories, historical disadvantage, and may include implementing programs, which is a complete misstatement of this specific section. And then the third element, which I've not asked questions on, all right, I've lost the article. I came across an article, and please people do not laugh, about 2000, in which the authors were writing saying that because of the free trade agreements resulting in the destruction of our industries and our local content programs, the aim of the PPPA was to provide a means of preferring local suppliers. As Sean Scott says, locality. And this is in 2000. I think that National Treasury may not understand the fact that transformation and the programs in transformation is BBBEE is the Department of Trade and Industry, local content is trade and industry, economic development is trade and industry. And as I said, I had a rather rude email. They feel that they can interfere in areas which is not under their jurisdiction. And we end up for a year now discussing this debate. The point of the matter is you could never have a pre-qualification on a BE level because the Act, PPPA Act, disallows it itself. Look, let's take into account there's a lot of confusion, like Sakaliga and the DA, all right? But the point here is this is about allocating those preference points. And the critical element for our policy must be a mechanism that allows objective measurement of that goal that you have set and an independent verification that the bidder is telling you the truth. Both elements is within the powers of the minister in the regulations. Yet there is no regulations on this critical area. I know I'm going off, but I've read this act through 20 times. I've gone back 20 years in references. I've gone back through Australia and New Zealand, EU. They've all got the same act. This is not something uniquely South African. And all of them are focused on job creation, development of local technology and local sourcing. Why is National Treasury trying to lose jobs? As I said, I'm a loss, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you for hearing me.
Thanks, Brian. Well, unfortunately, I cannot answer on behalf of National Treasury, but I think when as we progress with the presentation, I think to some extent you might be partly answered, and then we can pick up the discussion again later on. Okay, thank you, colleague. So yeah, it has been indicated that the RDP goals chapter 3. There actually some reference to they cite synergy between your BBBEE Act as well as the PPPA regulation. So yeah, I wanted just to get guidance quickly on that. Oh gosh, my mouse. Okay. Okay. So now, first with the understanding of the view of the Chief Office of the Chief Procurement Officer, which is National Treasury, it's saying the reference to the use of BBBEE status level goal to be used when allocating points has been omitted, meaning that previously we used to have that table that will tell us how much points to allocate on every level, and that has been omitted on the regulation. And then section 2.1 of the Act requires an organ of state to determine its own preference procurement policy to implement within a framework prescribed by the Act, meaning that preference points, whatever we may have, it may not exceed 10 or 20. We have to confine it to that limit. According to section 2.1 of the Act, again, we must, in the invitation to submit a tender, clearly specify those specific goals to which a point may be awarded. Using the BBBEE status level contributor does not provide for the opportunity to choose specific goals. I don't know what did that mean from National Treasury's point of view, because now what was happening is when one looks at the elements of BBBEE, there are those specific goals that you would find within the elements of BBBEE where one gets to get that certificate. Although specific goals will be used to allocate preference points, BBBEE remains a legislated policy of government, and compliance with its requirement is still important for organ of state and must comply with section 10B of the BBBEE Act when developing the preferential procurement policy. This is where I was of the view that somehow maybe National Treasury was kind of contradicting itself, or perhaps maybe confusing us. But anyway, let's continue. As I did indicate, using the BBBEE level contributor does not provide for the opportunity to choose specific goals. Then now, when you look at identification of preference point system, this is now in reference to regulation 3. It says an organ of state must in the tender document stipulate the number of points that will be awarded to each goal and proof of the claim of such goal. Obviously, this talks about what is that we're going to be using to allocate those points. So therefore, we'll have to indicate what is that the service provider will have to provide us for us to be able to give them those points. Is this not implying that B is not practical because it does not allow for specific goals? Like I did say, maybe that is what National Treasury will have to respond to, because this is now the confusion that they created. Now, here's an example. We have percentage of ownership of Black women, 10 points, head office located in the province, township enterprise. These are the things that will make municipalities excited, because this has been the biggest issue for municipalities in terms of locality, their definition of locality, even though our definition of locality is South Africa, also pertaining to provincial jurisdictions as well. But this could be the number of points that one would want to allocate in terms of specific goals that you would have in your preferential policy. Now, do we have the Office of the Chief Procurement Officer's view on the specific goals? I know that this Mr. Davis last week actually spoke about it, and maybe those who have attended the National Treasury roadshow might tell us, or perhaps maybe guide in terms of what did National Treasury say about this one in particular, because I think this is where everybody else is left a bit confused. Now, BEEK, with their press statement, very clear and not mincing their words, thus in implementing preferential procurement, an organ of state or a public entity will have to comply with both the requirements of the PPPFA regulation and the BEE Act, which means the BEE criteria will still be part of the 20 and the 10 points under the 80-20 procurement system, which currently empowers organs of state and public entities to set a goal, which in this regard include promoting access to Black people, Black enterprises to procurement opportunities in the organ of state. For me, when I saw this, then somehow I did not see a confusion. Because now BEE says, the Act says, within the 10 and the 20 points, you can actually advance, you actually have to. You have to advance those goals through the reference to the Act and the regulation as well. Now, also Section 10 clearly states that status codes of good practice says that you develop and implement a preferential procurement policy framework. Another thing that, colleagues, that I want you to keep also at the back of your mind is the BEE scorecard for organs of state. I don't know how many of you guys now have a BEE scorecard for your department or for your municipality. And you know, when you get your BEE scorecard, what are the elements of preferential procurement? What is the relationship between that element of the scorecard and the preferential procurement policy? I think they are linked, but obviously I would like to hear what colleagues has view on that. And then, does the BEE trump clause trump into the PPPFA definition of specific goals? Now, here's an interesting part, colleagues. In the event there is a conflict between this Act and any other law in force immediately prior to the date of commencement of the BBBEE Act 2013, this Act prevails if the conflict specifically relates to the matter dealt with this Act. What is the matter dealt in this Act? The matter dealt in this Act is the issue of preferential procurement as well as allocating of 80-20 and 90-10. So now, does that mean that this then prevails over the regulation? Does that mean prevails over the Act? Because the PPPFA Act, I think it came in 20,000, if I'm not mistaken, and the BBBEE Act came in 2013. So this is another interesting thing for one to actually note. Now, what is the way forward? In our understanding, National Treasury are encouraging organs of state to seek clarity on the use of the BEE scorecard in the preference policies. There did not seem to be willingness from the Office of the Chief Procurement Officer to invite or engage with DTIC on behalf of organs of state. And we tried to invite DTIC to try to clarify. Unfortunately, they were busy for today. But this is where we at, that Office of the Chief Procurement Officer says, no, BEE level certificates does not give specific goals. And then DTIC says, no, you need to comply with our Act. And within the Act of the BBBEE Act, they use BEE certificate where they allocate a BEE, different BEE level rating, depending on the elements of BEE that different organizations have to comply with. Now, understanding the DTIC and the BBBEE Commission's perspective, inviting your comments on the DTI and the BBEE perspective. Now, colleagues, option, ideas, or solution. Can we engage, please? Option one. Yes, Brian. You know what? No. Can I do this, Brian?
Sorry?
No, Brian, can I do this? Can you allow this to finish this presentation?
All right,
And
yes.
then at least then you can make an informed comment. Because now I think, like I said, to some extent, maybe some of the issues might be clarified along the way. Thank you. So now option one, it says include specific goals that are appropriate to your organ of state in your preferential procurement policy, Black-owned enterprises or whatever. Option two, you include both a scoring mechanism. Option three, include specific goals, which is Black-owned women, but incorporate BBEE scorecard attributes. BBEE scorecard attributes. The other thing, colleagues, is that, for example, if you're saying that we're going to give 20 pounds to Black-owned businesses or 100% women-owned businesses, what you're going to be using to verify that will be a BBEE certificate. It's not necessarily using the BBEE certificate to allocate points, but using the BBEE certificate as proof for one to claim those points, you know. So you can have Black-owned enterprises with the BBEE scorecard or EME, or Black youth-owned township EME with evidence to a BBEE affidavit. So now, what happens now, I think that's another confusion that we need to be cautious of, that there will be instances where within our preferential procurement policies, when we allocate these preference points, we will request bidders to give us their BBEE certificates. Now, this BBEE certificate will be a mechanism that will use to serve as proof for them to claim. Because on the BBEE certificate, they can even indicate that, or maybe on the affidavit, they could indicate that the company is 100% Black-owned. So therefore, we'll say, okay, here's a confirmation, 100% Black-owned. This is an EME, and it's valid. It has been commissioned. Therefore, we'll give 20 points to this person, whatever the case may be. So you have that element of the BBEE certificate. And then the other element which the National Treasury have an issue is where you allocate points against a BBEE level. Now, any other ideas, colleagues? I'm gonna, for now, pack this and then let's engage. I'm opening this floor. Brian, you're the first.
All right. As I said, I've spent many years analyzing this, all right? And these are extractions, they are legislation, all right? First of all, transformation is B-BBEE Act, all right? The interesting part is the B-BBEE Act trumps. That means it applies in your selection process prior to determining an acceptable tender. The second thing, which I cannot understand how this happened, is the relevant sector charters are permitted to have pre-qualifications on transformation. None of the sector charters have this. So the B-BBEE, we can apply it to our bids in our evaluation. The Act allows us. In terms of the preference points under the PPPFA, and the comment that you made that the detailed scorecard is the method for us to determine specific goals and to measure the specific goals, I agree with you completely. I don't think there's any restriction that if you say in the PPPFA section that we will award the points based on the BE level, if it happens after the price competition. It's the sequence that's important. The BBBEE applies prior to the PPPFA's section 1, and it can be used as a scoring mechanism in the second stage of the PPPFA. They're not in competition with each other. And
but Brian, there's a part that I think maybe you might be missing a bit. You are saying that the Act it's being used to determine if a bidder is a acceptable tender, and which that was the reason why we ended up where we are with the constitutional judgment about the pre-qualification. So currently, nowhere are we allowed to use the PPPEE Act or the Preferential Procurement to determine an acceptable tender. Acceptable tender is being determined on the basis of the compliance with whatever we may have put in.
Exactly.
Specification.
Exactly.
Then it's only when you get to the point scoring that then the BE or the Triple PFA Act comes in. And I think this
No,
is
no,
where,
no, Tony, that is where the error of Treasury lies. The BBBEE Act, right, applies to your organization and how you transform your organization. And what in the last session was shown from the guy from DTIC said, and which I verified, is that when you write a sector charter, let's say I write a sector charter for universities, the BBBEE Act allows me to set a pre-qualification on transformation, right? It's the only act that allows me to do that. What happened with the Constitutional Court decision is if the triple PFA and the 10 and 20 points only applies after the price competition, then the 2007 regulation saying that you have to have a pre-qualification before acceptable tender is in breach of the actual triple PFA itself. The error here is an error of logic. And my solution, and the way I'm applying it, is I'm following the logical sequence. BBBEE gives me certain authority, and I comply with that. But that authority basically is prior to acceptable tender. Under the triple PFA, when it comes to the allocation of the 20 and 10 points, I totally agree with you. The Act says we must be objective, it must be measurable. And I will use the relevant indicator, and it can only be in the detailed scorecard or the summary scorecard that's verified by the accredited agency, because only those documents actually complies with that element of objective and verifiable evidence. And I'll apply both, all right, on the side of it. Treasury is trying to force us into using 10 points to try to drive a transformation element from 20% women ownership to 40% women ownership. The premium is too little to make that social justice decision. So we need to use both acts in two areas to drive the transformation that we want, sticking to the primary acts themselves. Unfortunately, from what your presentation has shown, is that there's a competition between Treasury and the DTIC, and we are the losers to the equation, and that is sad.
I don't know, Brian, how you understand what Treasury is doing, but for me, what you are explaining, it's what Treasury has actually corrected already in terms of using pre-quals and everything. And I think right now we're not at the stage to have a conversation about whether the 20 and the 10 it's enough. Yes, it's a conversation that we definitely need to have, which also we also need to have a conversation about the premium that government will pay if they increase those point scoring. But for the purpose of this discussion, I think Treasury has dealt with what you were saying. Actually, maybe it's maybe how you understand it or maybe how you phrased it, but I think the one comfort that I'm having is that what you are saying, it has been corrected from Treasury's side. You know, I don't know, colleagues, if there's anybody who wants to have a bite again on this, because I spoke to, wait a minute, did I share my screen again? I'm trying to share again. No, where's my presentation? Okay, yeah. So here's the thing. Now, the option 3, colleagues, is this the solution where you go with the including specific goals, which is Black-owned enterprise, but incorporate BEE scorecard attributes? BEE scorecard attributes, meaning that you are now complying with the BEE Act, at the same time also complying with the Triple PFA Act, also dealing with what National Treasury is saying about BEE level certificates. Because the issue here is National Treasury is saying, we omitted those tables from the Triple PFA regulation because they were not addressing the specific goals. Fine, granted. But now, in terms of now trying to balance the two, we are saying we are going back to a Triple BBEE attributes, which I call them B elements. Talks about Black ownership, preferential procurement, women-owned, and all of that. We use those as what we put in our preferential procurement policy. I don't know if that will actually help for colleagues. And also another thing that came is this idea, where you say, the challenge with the following, you say you have, now I have 10 points or maybe 20 points. So I can use a portion of the 20 points to a BBEE score and another portion to whatever objective criteria I may want to promote. Maybe I can say 10 points I'll give if you have level 1, and another 10 points I can give to people based in this locality or whatever. However, the challenge with this kind of approach, it takes us to, in a way, a double dipping kind of situation. Because within your BE level, that would have been taken cognizance of. So this is another option. And then here, and colleagues, this one is usually, like I said, for municipalities, this one is an issue where municipalities would come and say, we want people within our jurisdiction. And we've always been like, because the regulation talks only about the table for the people, you don't have any mechanism that you can use actually to prioritize organization within locality. But again, when you look at these points, it's very, very little still. It's not going to really make much of a difference. But then again, it's taking us back to your triple PFA regulation 2011, I think. It's 2011. But there was that regulation where we used to have those breakdown of small points, which do not make a difference, but I think it kind of gives politicians a warm feeling in their stomachs. So I don't know, colleagues, what you think about this option as well. So then what is the way forward? Like I said, these are the options that are available. What are the colleagues' view? I'm opening the floor again. Guys, or are you as confused as I am? Colleagues? Brian says option 3. Yes. I see someone saying something. Sorry, I didn't see your hand. Yes, you can speak.
Sorry, I didn't raise my hand. It was Gerrit here, Thandy. Apologies.
Oh, okay. I thought I had somebody say.
So I wanted
Brian,
to say something, but I didn't raise my hand. Apologies.
Do say something.
Okay, Thandy, I think where I sit, and I kind of threw the cat among the pigeons last week when Henry presented that table that you just showed there. And I said, Treasury's mind is made up. And I think for going forward, we need to stop the speculative thinking around options because Treasury's mind is made up. So Treasury is saying to everybody, you can only allocate preference points for the specific goals as per section 21D. I would say we need to focus on the implementation of section 21D. Would then be the 3 categories of persons, as well as the goals of the RDP or the programs of the RDP. Okay, so essentially, if I understand Brian correctly, is that Brian is saying that before a tender can be considered as an acceptable tender, the question is, could an organized state then implement preferential pre-qualification criteria there in that stage? And only once the tender has been declared as an acceptable tender, can we then go into competition and apply section 21A and B, i.e. 80-20 or 90-10, in lieu of the prescribed specific goals that were stipulated by the organized state in the tender. So my view is very strong. I think we must stop being speculative and do what Treasury is telling everybody to do. Whilst we're going to continue to be speculative until 16th of January, when policies has to be adopted by accounting authorities, we will sit with a situation where organs of state will not be allowed to issue tenders because they have not accepted or adopted a policy. My strong view is let's look at the intent of the.
Oh, we lost you there.
Wording in the regulations. For example, section 21D. So what is the case as a bidder?
Your line is not very clear. We're
The other
losing you.
issue.
Oh no.
Which
Your line is bad.
I'm publishing this issue.
Gerrit,
in section 21D should carry equal
Gerrit, can I
status.
Gerrit, can I interrupt you? We lost you at the bigger part of what you were saying. We lost the bigger part of what you said. If you maybe can start again because your line was very bad. Yes. We lost you. Can you start again, please? Your line is very bad. Oh no, we're losing him. Okay, can we have Advocate Ntsaluba in the time while Gerrit is coming back? Let me just put on the chat.
Good morning. Thank you, Thandi. My question, Thandi, is relating to your option 3. I have thought option 3 was amended to include more designated groups than the one they used to be, like military veterans, and I don't see them there. So the danger of us just scanting on these, we might lose the developments that have since occurred over time. So the question for me is that, is this option 3, for me, it's not inclusive of all the developments that have happened, which require consideration, which have been approved by government. And if you adopt option 3 as it appears here, then your pre-qualification criteria still are missing the most important element.
Gerrit, I hope you are back. Before you say anything, police, can we clarify the issue of the pre-qualification? Pre-qualification has been found to be unconstitutional. And can we just, and I hear we all of us are very passionate and are not happy even about how slow the transformation is moving in terms of legislation in this country. But currently, this is where we're at. And we're now trying to manage the issue of irregular expenditure, of which SCM practitioners will be held accountable for if you're not managing it. So the pre-qualification criteria, can we just do away with that language? It's not allowed. We cannot do it, whether we want to do it or not. And then, Gerrit, I hope you are back, if you can be able to speak. While Gerrit wants to speak, there's Blake. So when looking at the BE codes, will it be acceptable to apply the B certificate for a portion of the option and then consider the other RDP goals, such as women ownership, SMME, environmental policy? Here's what Blake is saying. Gerrit, can I give you an opportunity to speak? Then we can talk to what Blake is raising. Gerrit, are you back?
Apologies, Thandi. I don't know if you can hear me now. I've switched on my own hotspot. The problem is when in public places like hotels, everybody's using the same Wi-Fi. So the point that I'm trying to say, if you can still hear me, is that,
yes, we can.
You know, constitutionally, you have to go back to Section 9 of the Constitution. Section 9 of the Constitution says, legislative and other measures designed to protect or advance persons or categories of persons disadvantaged by unfair discrimination may be taken. But Section 9 does not advise as to whether one category of persons will receive a more preferential status than the other when legislation is enacted. So essentially, Section 9 makes reference then to the categories like gender, race, disability, LGBTQ and things like that. So my other issue, what I was saying, second to my first issue is going forward, focus on what Treasury is instructing people to do and let consequences happen there, because for us to be speculative until 16th of January is going to create a problem for organs of state. Number 2 is the issue that I would like to bring to the table is if we agree that it's going to only be those 3 categories plus the RDP, whether each category of persons should carry equal status as opposed to 5 out of the 10 for being black, business owned, 3 for being women, and 2 for being disabled. What if the disabled lobby comes forward tomorrow and says, but that's the Constitution in Section 9 never said that you can give preference to being black. Or the women lobby might come forward and say, Section 9 of the Constitution never said that you can give a preference. That's the other point I would like to bring to the table. But my first point is, I think we need to move on. And as Brian, if I understand him correctly, is indicating, could qualification criteria, remember Section 10 talks about qualification criteria, not pre-qualifying criteria. Could we use it there at the stage in order then to look at all the acceptable tenders and then only go into the 90-10 or the 80-20 as the competition? So those are the 2 points I would like to make, Thandi. Thank you.
Thank you, Gerrit. You know, prior to this whole constitutional whatever story drama, I would agree with you guys. Can we just listen to what National Treasury is saying? But I think this exposed National Treasury, and as much as we have to listen to them, the judgment is very clear about responsibilities of the accounting officers. You know, the judgment is very clear about the responsibility of accounting officers, that's number one. Number two, even the regulation from National Treasury, the Triple-P Regulation 2022, talks about them not having the powers to actually issue any guidelines on this particular regulation. So as you choose to follow what they say, do follow them with caution. Now there's also this section on the B-BBEE Act that talks about if there's any conflict pertaining to the B-BBEE Act, whatever it is, B-BBEE Act will supersede everything. And this is where I think I said it in one forum to say, guys, we need to start improving our relationship with legal department, because legal can better guide us in terms of what needs to happen, you know. And when you talk about qualification requirement, again, whether it's pre-qualification or qualification, I guess, well, English is my 13th language. This is a process of getting someone to become an acceptable tender. And now what you are doing, when you put that, you are putting preference. It's part of preferential procurement. Women, disability, youth, whatever, whether you call it qualification or whatever, it is elements of preferential procurement. And that's what's going to expose you in an event. I wanted to talk to what Blake asked here. Blake says, when looking to the BE codes, will it be acceptable to apply the B certificate for a portion of the points when consider and then consider the RDP? The issue here, Blake, is that, remember, National Treasury says that this BEE level does not actually become specific in terms of the goals. However, the suggestion is go to the attributes of that BEE scorecard. And when you become specific on the attributes, you kind of deal with what National Treasury is facing. And then the only thing that you use the B level certificate is to verify that. I asked a question, colleagues, to say, do you guys have BE certificate for your respective organizations? And if you have BEE certificate, one of the elements is preferential procurement. How are you also going to be dealing with that element? I know one entity we're talking to last week, they actually got a finding from AG because they did not have a BE level certificate. Do you guys have that? Maybe by a show of hands from the colleagues, do you have that? And how are you also dealing with the preferential procurement elements of your BE certificate? Can I open that to the floor as well? Because I think somehow these are also intertwined to some extent. I see, okay, Blake indicated they're in the process of getting that. Is there anyone who has them? How are you dealing with preferential procurement? Because your BEE level certificate, when you get the BEE level certificate, this is what is going to be used to actually measure you on that element. So there's some interaction of some sort. Mlungisi, can you share perhaps with us in terms of how you're dealing with the preferential procurement element of your BEE certificate? I am Mlungisi.
Hi, Tandi. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
I think you have left me behind before this question. If I may ask for indulgence to talk to some of the issues that my colleagues have spoken about, Chair. Yes, maybe just a quick one on this one. The issue of the preferential procurement, we went through the process of the verification process, right? The verification exercise by an agency. And then when we deal with that aspect, there is a certain section that deals with empowerment projects and all those things. So it's quite an involved, maybe I will share with you and then maybe pass it on to my colleague Sanele Khomo just to give you a much detailed information on how we deal with that one. But where I needed clarity on, Mrs. Tandi, is on the issue of the policies, because it makes, I think section 2172B, it talks about the protection and advancements of persons or categories of persons who are disadvantaged by unfair discrimination. And the act there asks an organ of state to formulate its own preferential policies. I remember, I don't know if it was Sean who was saying that it's not compulsory for an organ of state. It says may or must or something, but I was a little bit confused on those two. I haven't checked both sets of documents. But my question is, our preferential procurement policies that must be ready before the 16th of January 2023. I hear the issue of preference. How are they going to address this? And now, if your policy incorporates and talks about those things, and in advertising your bids, you put some of those conditions to make a tender to be acceptable, will that be unlawful insofar as the Constitutional Court judgment is framed? I just need some clarity there. I don't know if maybe I'm off tangent, but my colleagues will guide me on this one. Thanks.
Mastaba, your hand was up.
Thank you.
Mastaba.
Yes,
Okay,
Thandy,
please.
thank you. I was just struggling to press here. Yeah, I think you're right by saying that the Constitutional Court was clear. It places the responsibility on the accounting officer to comply with subsection 2 of 217 and not National Treasury. But the risk here now is that the battle with National Treasury was fighting with is it Sakelicha and everybody else, is now going to come to the institution level. And that is why we just need to be careful how we deal with these issues at a policy level, and also get to be supported and advised as far as possible by National Treasury, including DTI as well. Because those battles, they are going to be now on our doors. Immediately when we start implementing those preferential treatment, the battles will be on our doors, and we should be capacitated to deal with them as and when they come, without not necessarily delaying the SCM processes and putting our organization into disrepute, and also risking our own careers in terms of that. So I think that is just my comment on that. And I'm glad that we've started talking about this issue. Perhaps this might not be the last. I think it's one issue that I really ask Sean that we must talk about it on a regular basis, because we don't know how is it going to turn out as soon as we use these issues and implement them at our institutional level. Thank you.
Thank you. Blake?
Good morning, colleagues and everybody. Yes, thank you so much. And I just want to maybe elaborate on, the question and so forth that I'm asking, and I'm getting the feeling from everybody on the call as well, as to say, look, we understand that the policy needs to be in place. We understand, what RTP wants to achieve, but obviously it comes from a practical implementation side to say, we've got 2 months less really, if you take, for example, the festive season and so forth into consideration, in which to have working documentation ready when we need to start advertising bids come the 16th of January. And that is sort of where my question is coming from. Obviously, BBBEE, at its core and its intention is also to address aspects raised in the RTP. And that's why I asked to say, is there no way in which, where elements of the RTP are already incorporated into the BBBEE levels, just for the sake of us having something, as entities in place by then, something that can be practically implemented to say, let's still continue with the BBBEE in some part. Then obviously, for example, let's take the 20-point structure. Let's say you put 10 of the 20 points to the BBBEE level, and we still use the relevant scoring table for the levels 1 to 8. And then the remaining 10 points can then be taken into consideration on specific aspects within the RDP which are not addressed by BBBEE. Things like locality, things like women ownership, not necessarily Black women ownership, but women ownership. Maybe a preference for example, being an SMME. We know in terms of the BBBEE scorecard, you know, yes, QSEs and EMEs do receive an automatic grading, but it's not as if that grading is then any different from somebody who also gets a level 1 or level 2 on a generic scorecard or a sector specific scorecard. So that's sort of where my question is coming from, is to say that, you know, everybody doesn't run off and suddenly develop their own forms, their own formats, you know, their own practical implementation. And across the country, across all municipalities and public entities, we have completely different looking documentation. So in that sense, that is where my question of saying, can we not start from a common base that everybody at least understands, if it can be justified in terms of the new preferential procurement regulations? And you referred to obviously the fact of where there's any, you know, ambiguity or gray area, the BBBEE Act and its codes will take preference. So in saying that, can we not then look at still continuing the application of the BBBEE certificates and their respective scoring structure, but, you know, not necessarily have to make it the full 20-point or 10-point complement, just so that there's something for us to proceed. And I'll end by saying, you know, it's very important, and I'm not sure if National Treasury has really considered this, is to say different organizations are at different levels of maturity. For a metro or large national entity, it might be very easy to have information, data, resources at their disposal to analyze, you know, locality, Black ownership, disability, veterans, so on and so forth. Whereas, you know, a very, very small rural municipality might not have the competence or the resources to have something very complex in place come the 16th of January. So that's really where my question is what would be the best approach now as effectively low-hanging fruit? Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. I think it goes back to, again, option 3 and the 80-20, the 10 and 20. Unfortunately, the ministries have distance themselves from it. So it's all about you coming up with your own as the accounting officer. For me, I was thinking about this to say that, you know what, adopt this. If I die, I die. Because at some point we need to have something in place. As I was saying, that you would want to also talk to legal. If you decide that I'm going to disregard what National Treasury is saying and then go with what the BBBEE Act says, because there's a section in the PFMA that talks to non-compliance with any National Treasury practice notes where it could lead to regular expenditure. This is when I think legal will come in very, very handy. I want to go back to what Mlungisi has said, colleagues, because this is what Brian, I think, and Gerrit to some extent are speaking to say, in determination of the acceptable tender. Brian is talking about how do we protect and advance these RDPs and your goals and everything. My view is that the advancement is on the 80 and the 20, but I think Brian has a different view. I'm not sure, colleagues, if people understood Brian's question, and if so, what is your thinking? Because my thinking was using those goals as part of determining an acceptable tender. You are still in a fancy way of pre-qualifying bidders using preference, these specific goals. And the law says specific goals can only be used on the 80 and the 90-10. Brian, Mlungisi, I see you raise your hand again. I hope I've captured you correctly. I'm going to give you first an opportunity before someone else can come in.
Thank you so much. Let me throw a spanner in the works.
You're not no, I'm confused.
No,
this guy.
you know,
It's fine.
no,
Go ahead.
You know, Chandy, there is something that kept, you know, it caught my attention when I was reading the RDP. The regulations do not talk about local content anymore, right? Yes. But if you read now the RDP, it talks about local content. I was teasing my colleagues here in the office that, you see, for me, what I'm going to be asking for in line with specific goals for the 20 or the 10, I'll be talking about local content if by the 16th of January 2023, nothing has come forth. It's just a thought. You'll see when you read. It's under 3.2 under economic goals and objectives. Just think about it on how maybe you're going to craft your specific goals without veering off from the article written by Gerrit, because I also read his article where he's talking about what he's alluding to now in the meeting. But the issue of local content, colleagues, we seem to be forgetting about it, whereas it is also one of the issues that incorporated in these documents that we need to reference when we're coming up with specific goals. That was something that I just thought maybe I should share with the colleagues. Thanks.
You are right about local content. It's just that one conversation I had with one colleague about the very same thing was to say that the problem with local content is, do we have the capacity to actually now evaluate it? And the other thing is that when you put on the 10 and 20, it's no longer disqualification matter, it's a points matter. So you can put local content if you want to put it and give it 2 points. If somebody doesn't comply with it, you're going to give them 0. You can't disqualify them. But it's definitely a point to note. Brian, please, and Gerrit, can you please share this article that everybody's talking about that you did? I think it also will be helpful. Brian, your hand is up.
Yes. What we're saying about the B-BBEE Act, right? It does give us the power to put qualifications in place when we design our tender documents, but it is not something that can be done before January next year. It's something that has to go through the sector committees and the minister at DTI to deal with it. It is an option, and I truly believe it is one of our most powerful tools that we can use to achieve the social goals we want to achieve. But it's something, let's call it a medium-term plan that goes through. The second thing, because I'm doing a lot of research work on construction, right? And in the articles from Addison Anthony on construction, the CIDB uses a qualification system, a grading system for qualifying bidders that they can partake in a bid. So we are allowed to apply qualifications in our selection process. But as Gerrit said, the moment that qualification starts talking about preferring one person of another person, we are dead in the water. We're the Titanic. We sunk. I think from a municipality point of view, they are there to serve the people of the city or the town itself. And to say that they cannot buy from their own members of the town, I think that is an injustice, because they serve those people both as the municipality, and those people serve the municipality as well. To say that they're not allowed to work together in a collaborative manner, I actually think that is actually unconstitutional, but that's just a private view.
Thank you, Brian. Colleagues, Khotso Ramotele also put on the chat to say, my take is that we can link the attributes of BBBEE scorecard into previously applied specific goal, HDI, locality, disability, youth, and further, if you still want to address the requirements of BBBEE, perhaps we can include them as a condition of a tender, not as a selection criteria. Colleagues, this is where we at. I understand that the BBBEE Commission is busy with developing guidelines. I also understand that National Treasury will also be issuing guidelines on the functionality matter as well. But at the end of the day is, yes, we have to comply with what National Treasury says, but please, let's not forget the judgment in terms of responsibilities of accounting officers, because that irregular will still be thrown in the head of SCM practitioners. And my advice is, bite the bullet, man. If you die, you die. You know, it's at some point, there has to be something. So with that being said, colleagues, I don't know if there's anybody who still wants to comment or to ask or to add anything before I close this session. Sanele has raised her hand. Yes, welcome, Sanele.
Yeah, hey, it's a hectic one.
If you die, you die, Baba. Just
I should have been a host. Why? Why? Because I was here before you.
yeah, you are Deputy Sean. We will engage on that, comrade, in another forum.
So, if you read this, one of the slides that were from the National Treasury on the rationale, it's a reference to the BBBEE status as specified goals to be used when allocating preferential points has been omitted. So in the draft regulations at the time, Section 2.1 requires an organ of state to determine its own preferential procurement policy and implement it within a framework prescribed by the Act. Section 2.1d of the Act requires an organ of state to include specific goals in its policy. According to Section 2.1e, an organ of state must, in invitation, submit a tender, clearly specify the specific goals for which a point may be awarded. Using BBBEE status level of contributor does not provide for the opportunity to choose specific goals. If you read through that, with our current situation, it tells you that BE in its current form, somehow it then takes away powers that are provided for by the BBBEE. Then further states that Section 10 of the BBBEE states that every organ of state and public entity must consider, and as far as reasonably possible, to apply any relevant codes of good practices issued in terms of BBBEE Act, developing and implementing their preferential procurement policy. It may be argued, therefore, that introducing BBBEE in its regulations may be deemed as an overreach by the minister. So the application of the BBBEE Act, organs of state coupled with the requirements of the organs of states to determine their own specific goals for each tender, suggests that BBBEE, as it was applied in 2011-17 regulations, would be an overreach. So reading through this, would the colleagues, Sister Thandy, would you say organs of states have an option to include BBBEE or not to include BBBEE if they would go if they would go with the wording that says as far as possible they may include it?
You know, Sanele, for
seems,
me, the main thing here is the BBBEE level contributor. And I think that's the thing that Treasury say. The BBBEE level status contributor, you get that level when there's a number of things that has been voted and we can't see what are those. We can't be specific. And the regulation says, be specific on every point that you're allocating. So there is some signage between BBBEE and PPPFA in terms of promoting business owned by people who are previously advantaged, like women, owned businesses, youth, and so forth. The only bone of contention here is the level certificate itself, where you say, level 1, I'm giving you 20 points. They say that it's a problem because that level 1 that you're giving 20 points, that level 1 has a lot of things that are made up of, which we cannot be able to quantify. And I think it was Brian, if not Khomo, who said, let's rather look at the attributes of the BBBEE, which I call elements of BBBEE. That if you look at the elements of BBBEE, actually, you will find the signage between the two. The only issue is the certificate itself. And I think that's the main thing that I'm picking up out of this, that these acts are not contradicting each other. It's just that they're saying that the level, when you get a level, and you remember with the levels, especially for the generic enterprises, remember there are certain elements that they don't have to comply with. They can opt, they can choose which levels they want to comply with. That's why you still find generic enterprise being a level 1, but they're still not black owned, you know. So I think because of that, National Treasury is saying, no, we want specifics. So therefore, go back to the BEE Code of Good Conduct and take from there and say, I'm going to take 100% company owned by a black person. I'm going to give it 2 points. That is fine. And when how are you going to verify that? You are going to request a BEE level certificate to confirm, not to allocate, but to confirm the claiming. And I think for me, that's what I picked up from all of this, that the BEE level certificate is the one that is the problem, but not necessarily the attributes themselves. I don't know, colleagues, if maybe anybody has a different view on that. If I cannot see your hands, please, you can speak.
Yeah, so maybe before anyone comes in, so in a way of the current form, you know, the EMEs and QSEs would be submitting the sworn affidavit. So would then mean that the sworn affidavit would then be would have to be crafted in a detailed way of allowing the organs of state to be able to see what constitutes the level 1 of their sworn affidavit. Is that what you're saying?
No, forget about level 1. The issue is the attributes of BEE says companies owned by black people. So if I'm going to give 20 points to companies owned by black people, how am I going to verify that? I'm going to ask you a B certificate if you're a generic enterprise. I'm going to ask you an affidavit if you're a QSE or an EME. And remember, on those affidavits, there is a breakdown. Yes. That shows exactly. So there is a breakdown. So whatever breakdown that goes to level 1, it's not important for me. I'm asking the certificate to verify if the company is 100% black owned. That's it. So now this certificate now serves 2 purposes. To another company, being a level 1, it can serve a purpose for that reason. But for my purpose, it only serves to confirm this one component, which is this company owned by youth? Is this company owned by women? And that's it. And then you allocate points. So that's the whole thing about the BEE, that the 2 pieces of regime are not contradicting each other. They are just saying we have a problem with the level because the level incorporates many things. And that many things is an issue. So for me is when I request a B level certificate, I'm not requesting it for me to give you points because you're a level 1. I'm requesting it for me to verify, are you a female-owned company if I'm giving points for female-owned companies? Or are you a black-owned company if I am? And the other thing, colleagues, that you need to remember, any other goal that you put, be it township, locality, or whatever, what is it that you're going to be requesting from the bidders to give for us to allocate them those points? So if you're a locality, we can say, give us a municipal rate statement. Fine, you give us the municipal statement and then we give you points, or whatever the case may be. But from the way things are currently, some of the goals, we will need to have the B certificates to help us verify that indeed this exists. So I think that's how I'm understanding it. I don't know if maybe colleagues have a different understanding, or maybe I'm understanding it correctly, but that's how I'm getting this slide from what they're saying.
No, I think you are actually making a lot of sense, and I think it actually shed some light, because you know, when you try to like get your head around this thing, there's a lot that you need to consider. I also do wish that we can also get a streamlined approach in this thing of trying to deal with the preferencing and you know, the empowerment so far as the procurement is concerned. Yeah, but thanks for it.
Thank you, Sanele. Colleagues, I don't know, guys. Sanele, can you please, before we close, can you share the slides on the chat group? Because there's people who requested the slides. I wanted to share, but I was just busy navigating the presentations.
Okay, no,
can you do
that's
that for
fine.
us, please, before we close?
Fine.
Colleagues, is there anything from anyone before we close the session? I'm not going to leave the meeting until Sanele shares the slides, so that people can be able to download. Advocate Ntsaluba asked about issue of uniformity, colleagues. We asked about that, and the answer to that is that uniformity is 80-20 and 90-10. That is uniformity, apparently. So that is the response around the uniformity, that the whole government is using 80-20 and 90-10, and therefore the price is still there. The 20, then one has an option to do that. Tibello, you've raised a hand, and then Gerrit also will come after. And Gerrit, please, your article, people are talking about your article, if you can be kind enough to share it with us. Tibello?
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. I was hoping that my colleague Blake from the Western Cape would have at least tried to share what the Western Cape province has done solely based on
you mean that country? Let's agree.
this province that tries to be proactive. I think it's really just trying to be a proactive and put mitigating controls against crisis mode, you know. Look, there's a circular already out issued in the province on the basis of uniformity. They have given out a model policy on that they're promoting that as a province we ought to consider adopting, and at least it will speak to the basis of uniformity and allow us maybe room to still further debate depending on what the procurement bill and everything else will come, you know, considering the timelines at hand. So my question would be, as a nation, with the different provinces, procurement is bound to become something else, knowing that, you know, the CSDs and everything else that has been done to try and minimize the red tape to make it easier for the businesses out there to interact with government. Shouldn't we be considering and trying to advocate, maybe on the same basis, some degree of uniformity in our policies, at least to sort of keep sanity within the country, and allow further developments as we try and stabilize, because otherwise it's going to be chaos in terms of what's going on out there. And yeah, I think we need to think bigger, think about the country and not just the individual state organs. That would be my comment and maybe a question in it.
Thank you. Tebolo, which province are you coming from? Or perhaps it's a country as well.
I'm in Western Cape.
Oh, you're that country. Yeah, no, please, guys, we know that in your country, apparently there's some things happening. If there is some, please share. Thank you. Gerrit, thank you for sharing the link. You've raised your hand.
If I may, Thandy.
Oh, the chat doesn't allow you, Sanele.
Thandy, if I may.
I will share it on our, what is this? The Instagram, the Telegram chat. Please share it on the Instagram chat. And then,
yeah, I'm not there, but you're welcome. I've got many other articles which I write on the whim around this issue. But Thandy, just in short, I'm going to just
wait first. I was responding to Sanele. Sanele, please just I'll add you on the Telegram and then you can share. I was talking to the Gerrit. You got your link. Thank you so much. And then you wanted to say something. Sorry about that.
Is that me? Go ahead.
Yes.
Thandy?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, good. Thandy, I just want to make two final points quick. Number one is, you know, the first thing that we taught in the interpretation of statutes model at university is always to ask what was the intent of the legislator. Now, I want to go back to section 21D and the intent of the legislator at the time of enacting or promulgating the act in itself in the year 2000. The act or the legislator chose to include only race, gender, and disability. But if you look at section 9 of the Constitution, it says race, gender, sex, pregnancy, marital status, ethnic or social origin, color, sexual orientation, age, disability, religion, conscious belief, and culture, language, and birth. Now, my question is, why would the legislator have only chosen 3, race, gender, and disability? Because that was the intent of the legislator, to allow preference point for those 3 specific goals. So my narrow reading is stick to that and don't bring anything else to the table. Then my last point is that in the absence, which I wrote about in this article, which I just shared now, the B-BBEE Act does not provide a preference point framework. Nowhere do we find that within the B-BBEE Act. Hence, the B-BBEE Act is not in line with section 2173 of the Constitution that prescribe that there must be national legislation in the form of a framework. So those will be my last 2 points in terms of the argument that I put forward. Stick to the narrow interpretation of section 21D and rest yourself in terms of your conscience with gender, race, and disability. Thank you, Thandy.
Thank you very much, Gerrit. Colleagues, okay, there's Lireku. I'm not sure, Lireku, when you say me too, you want to be added to the Telegram chat, I suppose. I think for your purpose, I'll just put my